Thank you, everybody. Sergeant at Arms, please escort our distinguished alumni from the Boys State classes of 1997 to the dais. Thank you, Jonas. I'd like to ask all of you, as we always do, to rise and uncover, which is to say remove your hat if you are wearing one, for the posting of the colors. You'll then join us in the Pledge of Allegiance and our national anthem, after which I will ask that you please remain standing while our Boys and Girls State Chaplain, Reverend Trent Williams, delivers the invocation. Sergeant at Arms, please present the colors.
Color guard, post colors.
And the pledge. I pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's cool, guys. It's a venue for learning. Just hang out.
Post colors. NA flag. Face towards U.S. flag. Present. Arms. Order. Arms. Color guard. Fall out. Walk off.
Reverend Williams.
Let us pray. God of our times and God of all time, we give thanks for being gathered together this night to look back and to look forward. We are blessed by the enthusiasm of these students and inspired by the examples of staff, alumni, and Legion members who have prepared the way for us. Help us now to learn from and appreciate the wisdom that comes from maturity and experience, and help us to embrace the energy and idealism of youth as we look toward our collective future together. May we become a people of greater dedication, compassion, justice, and fidelity to our land, to our ideals, and to the promises of freedom for all. We ask this in all your many names. Amen.
Thank you, everybody. You may now be seated. It may not have gone the way they intended it to, but man, they still pulled it off real smooth. Let's hear it for the color guard, guys. Come on. I've made so many mistakes on a stage you have no idea, and I'm probably going to make at least half a dozen tonight. So, guys, you're in good company. When I had the privilege of welcoming you to this program on Saturday, I made a point of letting you know why we honor and celebrate the stories, as well as contributions of time, talent, and treasure of those who have gone before you. It is not to be self-congratulatory, boost egos, or foster some kind of mutual admiration society. While it doesn't always sound like it, on the surface necessarily, these moments are entirely about you. Every year, those of us who serve this program become acutely aware of the passage of time. Every June, we are a year older, and you're still 16 and 17. And I like to use this particular marker as an opportunity to serve, but also to reflect. As most of you know, I'm married to a pastor, our chaplain, and such a life is marked by the constant, almost weekly reminders of how temporary this life really is, and just how quickly it moves. A continuous calendar of baptisms, weddings, and funerals. The human heart is remarkably strong, but it's also an unyielding play clock. Every beat of the heart is one grain of sand from the upper chamber of life's hourglass to the lower. And while I think most Americans struggle with that truth, I'm guessing most in this room probably see it as inherently negative, but I've always seen it differently, as nature's beautifully rhythmic way of calling us to be deliberate about how we spend each and every beat. A steady cadence reminding us that we are precious, and everything we choose to do or not do merits the best of who we are, no matter who we are, what we are given, or what we are openly or privately challenged by. As you will hear me say again at the end of the week, you deserve the best in life, and life deserves the best in you. When Boys State rolls around each year, I like to think about what I would say to my younger self, the 16-year-old version of me in one of those t-shirts at Boys State. If I could give that kid the ultimate cheat sheet to the next 30-plus years, what would I choose to convey? What comfort or assurances would I give? What warnings would I sound? What ugly truths would I reveal? Your staff and guests get the joy of spending time with young people who, in some ways, remind us of our younger selves. You get a chance to steal a look at a future proxy version of you. Alumni Night is our chance to do the next best thing to time travel, to collectively and consciously engage in intergenerational learning and wisdom, to reach out to the folks who paved the way, and at the same time reach back and lend a hand to those further behind. I like to think of it as a human chain through time. It is what every generation owes the next. So, 1997. A lot's changed in that time. It was my 8th year on staff, and I was a 24-year-old counselor who had worked on the transition of our program the year before to Stonehill College. A pillar of our program, Flo, who's working with Girl State this week, was giving me some feedback about something relatively stupid that I'd done. Flo, being a woman who I always felt should have been a country music singer for her tendency to speak her truth and just say it like it is, pulled me aside in the Roche Dining Commons and said, quote, "John, you're an arrogant young man, but you're also adorable," end quote. Thankfully, some things just don't change. I didn't know our first speaker when he was a Boy Stater, but I did get to know him not long thereafter. Tim French was my first-year counselor that year, and together we led an unusually well-matched group of students in T6. In all of my years of service, it has never rained so hard and heavy for so long during the program week. Rec period was all but a fantasy that year. But the natural chemistry of the Boy Staters assigned to us was something neither of us, at least to my knowledge, have been able to replicate since. Their cohesion, sense of humor, patience, and just natural affinity for one another seemed to make the flooding rains a non-factor in their enjoyment of the week. With so much time trapped in Boland Hall, a place we're not using this year, we were forced to innovate and get to know one another on a level that the usual busy Boy State pace seldom allows. Most of us, myself included, evolve over time in stages that are maybe 5 or 10 years long, changing and growing in our views of the world and our sense of self. Intellect and the acquisition of skill-based competencies can be accelerated in most cases. Wisdom, that's a little different. Wisdom is usually more like a collectible trophy that comes in little tiny particles over the levels of a lifetime. It is nearly impossible to fast forward. As with all rules in the real open world, there are always exceptions. I remember how I was struck by Tim's brilliance, love of all things science, ability to pivot in milliseconds from silly humor to the gravitas of a teacher, how easily he laughed, and how sharp and savage his sarcastic quips can be. I have a few scars. I realized midweek, as the rains continued to refuse us even a few hours of dry earth, I, the allegedly lead counselor, found myself in the shadow of a genius one could easily miss, cloaked in the humility of a young man who felt he simply had nothing to prove. Tim earned his bachelor's degree at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, RPI, and his master's and PhD at Yale. A chemist and a scholar, he would later go on to teach pre-med students at Harvard. Most people who get degrees from places like RPI and Yale, and who then teach at Harvard, find ways of letting you know it. Sometimes out of a legitimate need to establish their credibility, but more often to try and fill other needs born of brokenness within themselves. I've known the man for nearly a quarter century, and I think just about anyone on the staff can tell you he's just as likely to tell stories from his time working as a barista at Starbucks as he is the rigors and political dynamics of the world's most revered universities. And one other thing. Most people make the mistake of assuming their best and most loyal friends are the people who always talk them up, who are always agreeable. All of us need raving fans to counterbalance a world that can often be abrasive. I'm usually the raving fan, in case you hadn't figured it out. Knowing how much insults can hurt and how seldom any of us receive praise that is genuine and thoughtful, I try to be the opposite of that. You all have heard me speak several times over several days. It's lost on none of you how much I unapologetically and publicly emote. But it's really important to remember that sometimes the people you can trust the most, the people willing to brave the discomfort of speaking a truth you need to hear, are those who are willing to call bullshit. The pursuit of science is ultimately about an endless quest of integrity in search of the truth. Perhaps that's why in so many moments, all of us who wear blue shirts can tell you of a time when Tim thoughtfully chimed in with, "I disagree and here's why," or "I see it differently." A respectful but firm pushback on those worthy of his time, effort, and energy, and all of it for your benefit. Tim now teaches at DePaul University in Chicago, a place he sought out because of a personal commitment to teaching first-generation students. I've locked horns with my good friend many times, and no doubt we will do so again, probably before the week is over. But I take comfort in knowing that I knew him before he had an entire alphabet of degrees after his name, long before he was Dr. or Professor Timothy French. and that for some people, the truth of who they are remains a rare and refreshing constant. In his case, he is still a scientist, a teacher, a scholar, a truth seeker and teller, sarcastic as hell, and loyal even when the clouds and the dark roll in and the rains and the thunder try to throw you off your game. Gentlemen, your speaker, our long-serving staff member, and a guest of honor from the Boys State class of 1997, let's hear it for Dr. Timothy French.
First off, I want to thank JB for that overly kind introduction. When I was a first-year counselor, as he mentioned, back in 1998, John was my senior counselor. And so after 25 years, it's comforting to know that there are people on staff who have been here longer than I have, so that's appreciative. We were in charge of T6, and we were living on the top floor of Boland, one of the dorms over near Benalia and Casino that we're currently not using this quarter. I'm teaching the quarter system. Finals just ended for me Friday, so I'm still in school mode. So we're not using that dorm this year. We were hanging out in the hallway, and one of the Boys Staters tried to throw away a plastic Coke bottle in the garbage can down the hallway. And he didn't throw it out in any normal way. Oh no, history was going to be made. He threw it out overhand like an axe. And so the T6 Tomahawk Toss was born. Our kids played that game for hours. And I forgot it was raining, and that makes sense now. Because that was rec period. So our group played it for hours each day, and it became the official sport of T6. That happened 24 years ago, and it's still one of not only my favorite Boys State memories, but one of my favorite memories of John. And so I thank you for that. To me, this story encapsulates the magic of Boys State. Boys State is more than just discussing gen eds and running for office. Boys State is the connections that you make here. You're around each other for 16 plus hours a day for a week straight, going through a shared experience, working together. That's such a powerfully concentrated social environment that's just ripe for forging friendships. Just think about it. It's Monday. I'm going to say that again. Today is Monday. We've been here for 2 days. Reflect on that. Just reflect on how close that you have gotten to every single person in your town, and maybe even other towns at this point. That's why I love Boys State. These connections are what Boys State is, and really what life is. Being a blue shirt is not a 1-week-a-year job. It's a 52-week-a-year job. We celebrate each other's successes. We comfort each other through our tragedies. This year alone, I've gone to 2 bachelor parties, actually in the last 2 months, cross-country bachelor parties for blue shirts. I'm going to those weddings next month in July, and I'm a groomsman in one of them. I'm glad I've had the privilege of celebrating all of these successes this year alone with all these blue shirts. I've known some of the people in this room for 25 years, which is crazy to stop and think about, right? I graduated college 20 years ago, which is another monumental thing that I just can't believe. Well, my first college. For example, Davidson and I actually met each other during our Boys State year. So Davidson, back then we had 16 cities and towns. I was in T10, the very last town. And I became good friends with a kid in that town from Randolph, Bradley Jacobs, who was friends with the other people from Randolph. So we met each other during rec or some other off period, and I met Mike DiBenedetto and Mike Davidson. And Davidson, Will, and I all joined the staff the following year for our first year on the blue shirt staff. Since then, in the blink of an eye and a few appearances of the hippo costume of shame, now we're all up on stage for Alumni Night, which is crazy. I know that I can call on any of these people in this room standing around you up on stage in a time of need, or simply a time of friendship. All of them are a large part of my chosen family, and I'm extremely grateful and appreciative for each and every one of you. I also want to thank you all for your hard work during the off-season, now that I have been up on the board and seeing that side of Boise State. So I want to make sure that I thank everybody profusely for all of the work that they've put in the off-season as well as this week so far. So I thank you for all of that. As John said, I'm a college professor. I teach classes ranging from general chemistry to quantum mechanics. A few weeks ago, a former student of mine put on social media that she found some old notebooks from a class that I had taught her, her old thermodynamics junior level physical chemistry course. So as maybe you already do this, but I definitely did this in college. When teachers and professors, we have to talk a lot, so we say a lot of dumb things sometimes, and some ridiculously hilarious things. So I would always write down the nuggets that I would get in class, and I would save them all. And I'm glad to see that this, this process has continued. And so she posted on social media her list of life lessons by French. So the two relate, and these, I promise, at some level, relate back to physical chemistry and thermodynamics. Nothing in life is reversible. And if there's an easy way to do something, why do the hard way? So that social media post kind of inspired me for the procrastination of writing this speech, but also for how to close this speech. So this, I wanted to try to impart some life lessons, some quote-unquote life lessons that I give to either Boise Staters in the past or to first-year college students who are often first generation or first time going to college. So let's go back to the nothing in life irreversible. So this, how many people have heard of FOMO, or the fear of missing out? So it's a very real thing, and I experience it a lot myself, and so because I know that about myself, I try not to live with that many regrets. I try a lot of new things and volunteer for new opportunities, and I've noticed that this open-mindedness has helped me throughout my life and my career as a scientist and as a teacher. I know many of you are thinking about college. Keep in mind there are schools other than Harvard. For example, I've heard Yale is nice. But jokes aside, you should choose a school or military service, or learn a trade, or join the workforce. Not everybody needs to go to college. You want to find something where you'll thrive. Think about what's important to you, not necessarily what's important to your parents. You're different people with different needs and different wants. You're the one going to school, not them. Try not to focus on the superficial, like name or privilege or prestige. That will only get you so far. Do what will best for you in the long run, for both your life and your career. Speaking of college, I'm of the mindset that college should be one of the hardest, most challenging experiences that you take part in. College should be harder than your job. That's the point. We want you to be overly prepared and overly educated for when you get out into society and the workforce. Embrace difficulty, embrace complexity, embrace nuance. And then finally, as John mentioned, call people on their bullshit. In the past few years, we've seen a major uptick in propaganda throughout all of our media. Don't fall for it. Educate yourself. Actively fight against it by educating others. Remember, education is power. Speaking from my experience, I've focused a lot on my career throughout my life, and I've sacrificed a lot. Don't get me wrong, I've accomplished a lot and I'm proud of that, but it's easy to get hung up, especially in the day-to-day, to just keep your head down and work towards a goal. But remember what I said earlier. Life is the connections you make with the people around you. I hope you lean into that sentiment this week. With that, I will close. I'll hope you all enjoy the rest of your week here at Stonehill. Thank you, and go T4.
don't remember what year we started doing these alumni nights, but I think that might get the award for the most cogent and concise and incisive all-in-one. So thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. As I was listening to Tim give his speech, it's a powerful moment, by the way, when you've done anything long enough to show up for something like this, and to be able to pull that off isn't easy. But I cited so much Tim's intellect. It reminds me of something that a client of mine says pretty often. He's been an executive for a long time, but he's going through his first CEO experience right now, which is why he's retained me, and I'm helping him navigate some of that. But one of my favorite quotes from him is, if you want to be a thought leader, you have to have, thoughts. And I just feel like Tim always personifies that in reminding all of us of it. So, Tim, thank you. This is a difficult year. It's been a difficult couple of years for everybody, but usually, while we take tonight, the Alumni Night event, pretty seriously, we usually don't have to do a remembrance of someone who was here so recently. We often talk of sacrifice for love of country, and I'm really glad Tim talked about some of the things that he did. It seems both odd and tragic to me that a nation as divided as we have become can render honors to those who've fallen in service to its ideals, and then almost in the same breath, dehumanize fellow Americans along largely manufactured political divides. It's not to say we don't have some legitimate disagreements. I mean, democracy is a contact sport, and it has some very, very, very real world consequences. I've lived a lot of them. Still, our political discourse has become ill-informed, simplistic, toxic, moronically tribal, and petty. Less than 3 months ago, a man who sat in this room, in one of these chairs, a student of Tim's, in fact, died in service to his country. Captain Ross Reynolds attended Boys State in 2012. His high school biography read like many of yours. He was an Eagle Scout, a member of the National Honor Society, the wrestling team, the soccer team, and the robotics club. I think he may have been fire chief of his town at Boys State. Tim might remember. In his high school yearbook, he spoke of 2 life dreams: to become a United States Marine and a pilot. He did both. After graduating from Leominster High School, he went to Worcester State, graduating with highest honors. Ross got married this past February. Everything according to plan. In March, Ross and 3 crewmates were taking part in NATO exercises north of the Arctic Circle. While the exercise takes place every 2 years, it occurred this year under the cloud of war in Ukraine, a cloud that has yet to lift. In the late night hours of March 18th, a Marine Osprey crashed in the steep, rugged forest terrain of Norway. First responders struggled to reach the crash site, arriving around 1 or 2 a.m. local time. The crew of 4, all lost. In addition to our alumnus, Ross, 3 other young men died that night. Captain Matthew Tomkowitz, 27, of Fort Wayne, Indiana. Gunnery Sergeant James Speedy, age 30, of Cambridge, Ohio. And Corporal Jacob Morse, 24 years old, of Catlettsburg, Kentucky. They came from states that on a political map were both red and blue. They practiced different faiths. I'm guessing they probably had materially different views on hot-button issues all of you are debating this week. Interesting, though, they all wore the same flag patch on their uniforms, all trained the same, all bled the same, all perished the same. Their families had different traditions for grieving, but all experienced the same pride and the same horrible, horrible pain. All of it to defend something larger than whatever some talking head told them to believe. Ross and his fellow Marines collectively represent the best of our ideals and our nature. Tonight and all week, we celebrate not death, but those ideals and the best of us, the endless pursuit of what we know we can and should be. That is, after all, why you are here to learn. It's why we celebrate success on nights like this in its many forms. Ross achieved his dreams despite his life's mortal journey cutting short early. A painful reality, a painful truth, is that thousands of service members die in training exercises. It's not because the Pentagon doesn't care about their welfare. The last 6 months, if we ever needed a refresher on proof points, demonstrate that war and aggression can and do come to peaceful people very, very quickly. Training exercises are meant to be as safe as possible, but if made too safe, they would fail at their purpose. Vigilance and readiness for the brutalities of war that inflame entire regions in mere hours and days, they're as real as ever. Ross and his crewmates knew that. Upon his death, the two programs his family felt embodied what he valued most were the Scouts and Boys State, placing them prominently in his obituary. Two programs that mattered enough to him, and by extension to them, to merit inclusion at a time of unimaginable sorrow. Tonight, we render honors to Captain Ross Reynolds for who he was in life, all that he meant to those who loved him, who believed in him, and who supported him despite the dangers they knew all too well. With gratitude and a commitment to living lives of service in memory of Captain Ross Reynolds, United States Marine Corps and Boys State Class of 2012, I ask that you please rise. Our honor guard will place a wreath in his memory, or the Sergeant at Arms will, taps will be played, and after we will join in a moment of silent prayer or reflection, as is your preference, for a life lost, though remarkably well lived. Sergeant at Arms, bring forth the memorial wreath.
Present arms! Order, arms!
And if you will, a moment of silence. Thank you all. Please be seated. On Saturday, I told you about the special place and the special role of the Boys State Band. After such powerful and somber moments, I think you're about to see again why it matters so much to this week. In celebration of life and of joy, I ask our band director, Jonas Kane, to help lift our spirits. Jonas, please. Looking out at the room, I couldn't tell how many actual Game of Thrones fans there were. I was trying to figure that one out. And you guys give away like nothing. No help at all. It's tough up here. Come on, give me something. Will McDonough is not a household name, but many of his closest friends, colleagues, and clients certainly are. Will's mind, I think, lives at the intersection of his own creation, the world of professional sports and the world of high finance. A native of Westwood, Will studied at Boston College, and he was a blue shirt for a number of years before the demands of his self-made and ever-growing group of businesses demanded more and more of him, as has his beautiful growing family. I'm unusually good at keeping track of these things, and I gotta tell you, I lost track of Will's business interests a long time ago. He started his full-time career as an operational kind of go-to guy, get things done guy for the New England Patriots. And when he talks about that time in his life, he'll describe himself as just a kid in the front office. Will was never just any ordinary kid. How do I know? Well, because ordinary kids don't go from being some gopher in the team's business office to Tom Brady's most trusted partner and friend. Funny story, and I know I can get away with telling this because this appeared in print, but Will was originally rejected by Boston College, and it's usually considered bad form to introduce somebody by pointing out something that is seen as less than positive. But before you judge me, consider this. Undeterred, Will wrote a thoughtful letter to the dean outlining the 5 reasons he felt the dean was in error for having denied him admission. Here he was, like a year older than all of you, and he took on a storied institution of higher learning, and he pulled it off. Not too long after that, when serving as a counselor here at Boys State, he came into my room once needing to use the phone. Now, cellular service was pretty limited still, and the reception here at Stonehill, if you think it's a little tough in spots now, it was abysmal at that point. So several of us had these landline phones that were provided by the college. They were like 50 years old at the time that we used them. And this was really a way back. At that time, Adam Vinatieri was still a young kicker for the Pats. So Will walks into my room at like the end of rec period while I'm getting dressed for dinner, mentions something about having colors in the third dinner, and proceeds to jump on a call and negotiate this insane contract for the star kicker for the quarterbacks, for the kicker for the Patriots, complete with large dollar signs, truck leases, and like a bunch of other perks that I just couldn't keep track of. And I think what stunned me most was just his kind of matter-of-fact tone. He sounded like he was ordering a pizza, you know? He was so chill through the whole thing. And when the deal was done, Will just hangs up the phone, turns to me, and began suggesting that we make some edits to Gen Ed 3. Now, after listening carefully, I watched as Will walked out of my room and then proceeded to discipline a Boys Stater for tossing a Frisbee in the hallway. And you know how like sometimes if you just like leave the door at the right angle, it just kind of slowly closes in the cross breeze by itself? I remember looking at it at the time, and as the door closes, the like full-length mirror appears, because remember, I was getting ready for dinner, and I realized this whole thing, I was still in my underwear. I mean, seriously, the guy just operates on multiple levels at one time, and aside from the incredible awkwardness of the whole situation, demonstrates the man's ridiculous ability to focus, pivot, and focus again. Either that or he was just so traumatized that he blocked it all out, I don't know. Will's run billion-dollar portfolios at Goldman Sachs and several firms he's joined or even launched himself. When we were catching up a few weeks ago, I asked him to fly up from DC to meet with all of you, and he was telling me that he was considering skipping the NFL draft this year. Marriage and family life just kind of changes you. He'd rather play with his kids than navigate red carpets these days. But when it came to Boys State, he didn't hesitate. The NFL draft, nah. But for Boys Staters, of course. One more thing about Will. He's not the only successful or powerful person that I know, but he's without question the most caring and humble. Every now and again, you'll see an article about him. They're rare, but they appear here and there. And one author noted that no matter who's sitting next to him, he has this kind of casual manner that, he just treats all people the same. I'm like a country mile kind of far from the more impressive Brady in his contact list. But I know this. He answers calls from both of us the same way. Hey, brother. Brother. It's how he sees himself in relation to his friends, goat or not. Please welcome one of Boys State's favorite sons, benefactor and friend, Will McDonough.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. When I was asked to speak to you guys tonight, I of course was flattered. I remember being in those same seats on this same campus 25 years ago, and remember the alumni night and how that impacted me, and it was just a cool full circle moment to be up here, so thanks for including me.
Thank you.
Many of the friendships I made 25 years ago, I still have today, as French talked about, John's talked about, and you guys will hear. And John's anecdotal story is an accurate one. This is a special brotherhood, and I'm honored to be a part of it and thankful to be included in it. And I'm glad that you guys are now a member of that brotherhood with us. I remember being a junior at Westwood High School feeling driven by different things than my classmates were. And when I came to Boys State Week, I found that there were a lot of kids like me who wanted more from their high school than it had offered them. I was excited about the bigger world out there. In fact, a kid in my city, I was in C2, which I loved. A kid in my city ended up being my freshman year roommate. And that was a pretty cool experience too, to think about someone that I met, like we're saying, it's Monday. You meet someone here and you just realize that you guys are operating on the same wavelength, and that's a special thing. Throughout my life, I always sought the bigger room, and this drive led me out of my hometown, out of Boston, out of Massachusetts, and even around the world as my career progressed. I hope you guys do meet those lifelong friends this week as well, and I hope you feel the energy of your fellow Boy Staters, that there's a bigger world out there for you, and you're going to have an important role in it. For this talk, John asked me to think about what I wish I knew when I was a Boy Stater. And as he alluded to, I've been lucky to do some cool things in my life and work with some great humans and some great organizations. Einstein said a person learns more from their mistakes. A smart person learns from their mistakes, and a wise person learns from other people's mistakes. So here are a few things I wish I knew 25 years ago. Number one would be to be present. I spent too much time in my high school and college and even my career stressing about what was next, about my adult life, about being an adult. I wish I was more present for some of the best experiences of my life. I don't even remember the stories John's telling, and that's unfortunate because I was so busy and just churning that I didn't stop and smell the roses as often as I wish I did. Especially in today's world with iPhones and social media and 140 characters all around us, the ability to set down your phone, look people in the eyes, have meaningful time together. I was lucky to share some of that with some lifelong brothers earlier today, and didn't see a lot of people looking at their phone during that quick connect. And I think that's an important thing. Really be present, enjoy the moments that you're in. You're sitting lectures this week, even this one maybe, and roll your eyes in the back of your head and be thinking about worrying about something back home or stressing about something. Just try to be present throughout your days and throughout your years, and you'll be appreciative of it. In that same vein, I also don't want you to be in a vacuum. Look around at the diversity in this room. When I came here from Westwood, I know there's some Westwood boys here too, who I hope to be able to say hi to. When I came here from Westwood, Boy State was a lot more diverse than Westwood. But you have to realize that even though these kids in this room aren't in your same zip code, they're very similar to you. They're from the same part of the state as you, let alone the country as you, let alone the world as you. And we find ourselves these days, I think, also in the social media age, in vacuums. Your feed is only the people you follow. You tend to only follow the people you agree with, right? If you think that you're a Republican, watch CNN. If you think that you're a Democrat, watch Fox News. Take yourself out of your own vacuum. Understand different perspectives. Understand the different side of the coin. And that'll make you a more well-rounded person. I hope it brings you more conviction in what your beliefs are. But at the bare minimum, it'll make you more well-rounded in your understanding of the arguments. One of my favorite things that was said in a board meeting years ago to me was, the best alignment comes after argument. And I think you'll see that sometime this week with debate and with some of the practices that you're put through. It's really important to not argue in the sense of the term, but to really clash and understand each other's perspectives, and from there comes real good growth. When you get to college, which is an exciting time and coming soon, and John, I didn't know you knew that story, but I am proud of that story and found the letter recently. I'll tell a quick anecdote that some of the counselors might appreciate. I was visiting a friend my senior year in high school who was a freshman at BC, and I may or may not have been in a room where there was alcohol. And I may or may not have been reprimanded. And I received a letter 2 weeks prior to that letter from the dean letting me in that banned me from campus, which became quite a complicated thing to navigate as an incoming freshman. But, when you guys do go to college, one thing I regret is I didn't go abroad. I think that's a really great opportunity. Very rare to have another opportunity to just live in a different part of the world. I really encourage you to take advantage of that time. And also during that time, go broaden your coursework. I have a lot of friends that went to college for a specific major, and that major put them on track for a specific career. And before they knew it, they were in their mid-30s doing the same thing they did when they were 21, and they were never even sure that that's what they wanted to do in the first place. So when you're in college, try to go as broad as you can with your coursework, educate yourself, and expose yourself to as much as you can. Another thing that John alluded to and that I benefited from was, when I was 17 and 18 years old, I did get a part-time job for the New England Patriots. They hired me working 2 hours a day, nights, and I was making $5 an hour, but it cost me $12 to park. So I was losing money, but I still showed up every day, and over the course of the next 5 years throughout my time at Boston College, I had 5 different jobs in 5 different years, and I made nothing. But had I done that when I was 22, I couldn't afford to work for $5 an hour. I had to clothe myself. I had to house myself. I had to, be an adult. And when you aren't yet having those responsibilities and burdens, it's a very important thing to expose yourself to as broad, not only, as I say, with your coursework, but find yourself life experiences through travel that you won't be able to do, except for 2 weeks of vacation a year when you're out of college. And also, just always be trying to put yourself in situations where you're learning and growing when you can afford to, so that by the time you are 21, 22, you have more conviction in the path that you're committing to, because once you're on that path, you could end up as a chemistry major, and the only thing you can do in your life is be a drug dealer or teach chemistry. When I was working for the Patriots and the teams in those early 2000s, and this got some attention recently in that Man of the Arena thing, which I thought was an excellent production. I was lucky to be a part of those early 2000s teams when, as is spoken of in that documentary, the guys would challenge each other and say to each other, "What did you do today to get the edge?" And they would, "Oh, I showed up 15 minutes earlier than you. I lifted 20 minutes longer than you. I did an extra hour of film than you." And it wasn't about the opponent. It was about them competing with each other to make each other better, which ultimately led to those teams being excellent. I even did this yesterday, and I do this all the time, and we still text about it, all those old boys. When I was in the airport yesterday coming up here, going up some stairs with my suitcase, I'm a righty. I carry it with my left hand. When I'm drinking water at the dinner table, I always try to move it to my left side. Just small wins, small challenges that you face throughout the day. And you might think it's trivial, but that adds up. And they say steel sharpens steel. People that win small battles, those are the people that win wars. And so find small challenges in your day. If you're in the gym and you do a rep at 10 with your right, do 12 with your left. Try to find balance in your life and just find those small wins that make you feel good. And, as some people say, why would you do that? F you, that's why. One of my business partners and friends gave me a book almost 20 years ago now called The Four Agreements by a guy named Don Miguel Ruiz, which I also encourage people to check out if you're not familiar with it. Not to ruin the book, but the four agreements are: be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. Think about how simple that is to follow. And the first one is the most important to me and is something that I've practiced throughout my life, and I encourage you all to as well. Be impeccable with your word. People come in and out of your life, as you mature and grow older. But what you'll realize is the people that you depend on are the people you can trust. And the reason why I'm so honored to be here tonight and to be a blue shirt, I've seen matured to be some yellow shirts, is because, as Tim alluded to as well, I haven't seen a lot of these guys in a long time. But they know that if they ever needed anything from me, one phone call, one ring, and I'm picking up. And I know the same about them. And that's the brotherhood that you guys are newly exposed to, and I welcome you to. It's a special thing that, I'm glad to have you be a part of. Even if it's I'm on my way and you're not on your way yet, small things, be impeccable with your word. If you say something to somebody, you make sure that that's an accurate thing, and just make sure that that's an important part of your life. Wayne Gretzky once explained to someone why he's good at hockey as saying, most people skate to where the puck is, and I skate to where the puck is going. I, in my career, have been able to do, various things, and really when I found success is when I started to find industries that didn't have competition. When you're 22 years old and you take a job at an investment bank or in a big organization, it's pretty hard for you to be smarter than the people that have been doing that job for 10 or 20 years ahead of you. It's pretty hard to compete with that. But if you come into a new organization and you have a new skill set that's more relevant to your demographic or your age or something that your seniors or your bosses probably don't know, well, then you're going to have a seat at that table. I've started to focus my investing career on where the puck is going. I've spent the last 5 years in blockchain technology, which I highly encourage people to learn about and spend a lot of time in. That is definitely coming. That is definitely here. That is definitely the future. And as you think about what I told you about coursework, and as you think about industries to get involved in, no matter what the industry is, find something that you uniquely can bring competitive edge in that isn't just that you read an extra book than the guy who's your boss, because that's going to be a hard thing for you to get. And if you define your own skill, you will easily find ways to move up the ladder faster than those that are just moving up one ring at a time. Voice state's important because it takes the top leaders in their respective towns right before they're pushed into the real world and exposes you all to civics, to government function, cements how important the political world is in our life. If we're lucky, one of you in this audience tonight will decide to dedicate their life to bettering our community and standing up for your fellow man. Our world needs better politicians and leadership. It would be my dream to have a boy stater from here go on to choose that path and make our world a better place. If that's not for you, that's okay. It will allow you to appreciate and respect those that do choose that path, who go on into the military, who do serve our country in different ways, be they be through police or fire, and appreciate that civic contribution to our society. I want to end by thanking Mark Avis and the Legionnaires who continue to keep this program alive and thriving. This is not a 1 week a year job for people. This is a 52-week commitment. I'm appreciative of that. I want to thank John for having me tonight, and the counselors for your continued support and diligence in keeping this alive. This is very important to a lot of us, and not all of us are able to show up like we once did, but we continue to have an important part in our life here. This continues to play an important role in our life. So I appreciate you guys all having me here tonight, and I look forward to spending more time with you. Congratulations.
Will mentioned, and I mentioned at the beginning, one of the pieces of advice I try to give to the alumni that we ask to come back. Not all of them are always former counselors. We've all taken different paths, but often it's a logical fit, the people we've stayed in touch with the most. One of the things that we try to do beyond let me give advice to my 16 or 17-year-old self, try to talk to you in ways that adults normally don't get a chance to do. I don't know about you, but most of the teenagers that I talk to, and certainly from my own experience as a teenager, I'm not a parent, but there's this sense that something kind of breaks somewhere between either becoming a parent or a teacher or something, and this like cluelessness kind of sets in. And aside from the natural generational thing that just, I think happens for all of us, I think one of the things that drives that is that most adults are in positions relationally to you that don't allow them to be as direct and as candid as deep down I think they'd want to be. When you're a parent and you want to make sure that you stay in that role and that kind of a friend, kind of mentor role as your kid grows into adulthood, you're still not really able to let go of the role that you had. Teachers are under incredible scrutiny. Most of the adults that you interact with, you have to interact with in a way that's very, very different from the way you get to interact with the staff here or with our alumni or other guests that we bring in. And I always try to ask them the same thing. Give some raw truth of yours to these students because they normally don't get to hear those kinds of things. The other thing that I usually ask most of our guests to do when I try to prep them, because folks are always kind of desperate to make sure they've got everything at the right length, the right level, whatever, so that they kind of blend. Remember what I told you all on Saturday? Spend less time trying to fit in and more finding your truth. I try to remind them that one of the things we want to do tonight is show to all of you success in its many different forms. There's a lot of difference between the three you've seen so far, because I include Ross in those three. He found his truth and he found success in his private life and in his professional life. And our next guest has done that as well. And hopefully he won't hate me for this, but more than once, I had to work him almost a year to get him to agree to talk tonight, because when he thought about his peers, guys like Professor Timothy French and Will McDonough, he kind of sees this rarefied air and looks and says, that's not me. Well, speaking of calling bullshit, I sent him this really long text message one, but I don't know, one day, it was probably maybe 10 or 14 days ago. And I don't remember most of it. I tried to look it up when I was sitting there, but I also wanted to listen to Will. But I just remember it started with WTAF exclamation point. Everybody has a story, and it's a story that matters. I've known Mike Davidson for just as long as I've known these guys. Mike's taught me an awful lot of things. For one, he's taught me how to discipline students in unique ways. But I have to say, not quite over the line of what might be considered hazing, but rather, seriously, ways that are unique enough that any young person or young staff member can't help but remember the message. This is a term I've used actually with Tim more than once, but I've used it with Mike over the years as well when I've introduced him to people just in my network and just doing the kind of connecting that we all try to do for each other. I don't know, it's kind of an old film now, but I don't know how many of you saw the Russell Crowe film Beautiful Mind. He's this genius mathematician, and cinematically the way they demonstrate that is the numbers just kind of float right off the page. Maybe this isn't such a great example because he loses his mind, doesn't he, by the end of the film? Okay, so maybe that wasn't so good. When I wrote it, it sounded like really, really zen, but all right, maybe not. But Mike started his career working for Best Buy, a big box store I'm sure all of you know. And here he was, like fresh out of college, and he's in a warehouse, and he's supposed to not only manage the movement of both small and very large goods coming and going, delivering to customers and all that stuff. Pretty much everybody there is older than he is. And some of them are corporate types, people like, I was going to say me and Will. I don't think I put me and Will in the same sentence, but still, basically people who look at screens and do everything just appear all day, and minutes later, be able to get through to a union guy who's worked the floor for decades and have some credibility. Mike can look at a warehouse, a spreadsheet. What I just see is, honestly, a room full of crap. And somehow he sees these unique relationships, ways that things can move better from place to place, serve customers better, improve top line revenue, bottom line, profit. He's done it not only for Best Buy, but some companies like Restoration Hardware that don't mean anything to you anymore, but also companies like Apple. He does it in a different way now, supporting some of the oldest and largest franchisees of a place you're probably familiar with called Dunkin' Donuts, owned by Inspire Brands. I can't tell you how excited I was when we finally got a Dunkin' Donuts franchise down in College Station, Texas. It was a long time coming. I recently got a part-time teaching gig at Mace Business School at Texas A&M. It's a place I've been trying to break into for a long time. It hasn't been easy. And a gentleman there just happened to reach out to me online on LinkedIn, and turns out he was a Boston guy who went to Northeastern. And knowing that one fact, when I went to just do a meet and greet with him, because the office is like 13 minutes from the home that Trent and I share, I went to the Dunkin' Donuts first, and I came back with a box of Munchkins and an insulated coffee mug from Dunkin' Donuts. And it warmed the meeting, and we got to conversing, and about 10 minutes in, he said, "Have you ever taught the master's level before?" And I said, "Well, I've done some guest lectures, that's about it." Long story short, or short story long, depending on your point of view. Fast forward, he invited me to teach in the business school in their master's program, which I've just started doing as a visiting lecturer in career management. But while I can't give all the credit to the extra trip I made to Dunkin' Donuts, it completely changed the temperature, the relational temperature of the room. And I remember sending a text to Mike Davidson and saying something along the lines of, I tried to find the text too, but I couldn't, so I tried to scribble it. Now I can't read my own writing and the margin here, but I wrote something like, the beltway from graduate school to corporate America, guess what? That shit runs on Dunkin'. A simple "I love it," an exclamation point, and it was done. Mike Davidson's been teaching all of us at this program for a very long time, student and staff alike. Every time I talk to him, I learn something new, different ways of looking at things, different ways of phrasing things, and most importantly, a simple humility and reminder about what it is that matters most in life, the people closest to you, the people that you have intimate relationships with, the children that you raise, old school stuff like the neighbor right next door. All of these things that most of us have forgotten in a world full of cul-de-sacs where most of us don't know the people across the street, next door, and sometimes it seems like even in our own home. Mike calls me for advice periodically, and somehow by the end of the call, I feel like instead, the tables get turned, and I find myself getting advice from him. So it seems really fitting that after all, I did ask him, however long it took, to finally come and speak with all of you. So I hope you'll listen and pay attention to perhaps the best speaker of the evening, Mr. Mike Davidson.
Nothing like a Brady intro. So first, good evening. I appreciate y'all having me here, and I'll keep it quick because I know the Celtics are about to get going. So 25 years ago, I showed up at this same campus thinking this was a great way to get out of a week of school. I had absolutely no idea what this program was, truly. I just showed up and looked around and immediately deemed myself far too cool for whatever was happening here. But then by the first night, as it was kind of coming to a close, I looked around and I wasn't having nearly as much fun in my superiority as everybody else was having all around me. And in that moment, I could hear my mom in my head, and she always did this thing. Anytime we were at a family party or a wedding, if you were sitting off to the side, she'd kind of walk up and just snipe. And she'd be like, nobody's ever had more fun watching people dance. And she would always say that. And she would just kind of throw that elbow, and then before you knew it, you're out dancing. But I remember that moment. And that night, I decided I'm going to go all in. I'm just going to embrace it. I'm going to dive in. Whatever this is, I'm still figuring it out, but I'm in. And that idea, that conscious decision to give Boise State a chance was one of the best decisions I've ever made, truly. And ironically, looking out at you guys right now, that was the first time I'd ever done any public speaking. I stood up and ran for Attorney General in front of about 200 or so nationalists. Right? I didn't win, but not even close, really. But I was able to kind of, through the speech, kind of whip everybody into a frenzy and enjoy the moment and kind of feel what that's like to stand up there and have that moment. And then afterwards, my town, we had a gen ed coming up, and they were like, we want you to deliver it. You deliver it. And I said, okay, all right, I'm in. And then I stood up, and that year we had, 450 people. And never having spoken in front of anybody, got up. I probably pitched some nonsense that didn't make any sense, and again, frenzy but fun. But that was the important part. They chose me to do it, and I went up and I took it and I did it. In my high school, I was a big fish in a very, very small pond. But coming over here, I was able to kind of see that I could swim in the same waters as all these other big fish. And I had no idea. I didn't know what that confidence was. So for me, coming out of that confidence boost carried me long beyond Boise State. And it's safe to say that decision to embrace the experience changed my life. Honestly, it sounds like hyperbole. It's not. It's not at all. I returned as a counselor for 10 years before life got in the way. The best of us can come back every year, but the rest of us have to figure out a different way to do it. In that time, I learned how to fundraise to provide that same experience for others. I forged the relationships that these guys talk about that week, and then coming back as a counselor to where no matter what happens, we can come back for a day, a week, could be 5 years. We just pick it right back up. It's that brotherhood that everyone has mentioned so far. That all came from the decision to be open to a new experience, to put in a little effort and push outside my comfort zone, to take a chance. That idea and that success led me to accept a scholarship to a Southern military college with absolutely no history or deep personal knowledge of the military or the South. To take a chance and study abroad in Australia despite having almost no travel experience, and I didn't have a passport. I had to figure that out to be able to travel abroad. It empowered me to take a risk and change careers when I realized that I wanted and needed more. To ask out that girl who was way too hot for me. We've been married for 12 years, by the way. Side note here, as I was practicing the speech, she smiled when I said the too hot line and then immediately frowned as I had written 11 years of marriage because it's 12, and she was right as usual. So as I'm standing here tonight, 25 years removed from the experience, I would first like to say thank you to everyone who's contributed to the growth and success of this program, to the Legionnaires, to the counselors, to the foundation, to everyone that just keeps this program running. They are who allow all of you to continue to feel this impact and have this experience that I hope will drive this type of experience throughout your life. To my Boys State brothers, who again, every time we pick it up, we're always right here. I'll also see what I can do about that hippo costume of shame if it helps. Love you guys. Now finally to all of you, everybody's given some advice, it's my turn. I'm gonna provide a little old guy advice here. People often tell you to live your truth. It's good advice, but don't place limits on what that truth could be. Push yourself. Go beyond what you think are the safe boundaries. Safe is boring and safe is easy. Find comfort in the discomfort. When you find yourself in a situation that you may be too cool for, or not cool enough, or just filled with anxiety, embrace it. Take a chance. Do it. Nobody has ever had more fun watching people dance. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
I'm not sure what all of you expected when you came to Boys State, but I don't think we've ever really figured out how to talk about Alumni Night in an accurate fashion in promotional material. There's just something about this. A year after these guys went to Boys State, in 1998, there was a film, maybe you've seen it, because it kind of shows up on various networks, streaming networks now and again, called Meet Joe Black. Anthony Hopkins was cast as a billionaire media mogul by the name of Bill Parrish. And Bill is a success in every sense of the word. He's called upon throughout the film to reflect on his life, his business, his relationships, his legacy. And he finds himself rethinking what it means to have deep and real relationships with friends and family, to love and to be loved in return. During a lavish 65th birthday party planned by his 2 adult daughters on the grounds of his vast estate, surrounded by those friends, family, celebrities, congressmen, the wealthiest of the wealthy, the orchestra plays Happy Birthday, and his multi-tiered cake has a single candle for him to blow out and make his birthday wish. After the applause of his guests, he says the following, quote, "I thought I was going to sneak away tonight. What a glorious night. Every face I see is a memory. It may not be a perfectly perfect memory. Sometimes we had our ups and downs, but we're all together, and you're mine for a night. And I'm going to break precedent and tell you my one candle wish, that you would have a life as lucky as mine, where you can wake up one morning and say, I don't want for anything more." My young friends, nights like this are rare, and they are the moments in a noisy and overscheduled human story where you get just a fleeting second to feel the incredible blessings of friendships, and yes, even family like this. It is at moments like this that I feel like I might have an idea of what the fictional Bill Parrish would have felt, save except his billions of dollars. This right here tonight is a form of wealth and enrichment in the most private of private bank portfolios, and the only one that has any real value in this life and whatever it is, if anything, that follows it. I suspect my other blue shirt brothers, or normally blue shirts, are feeling it, and I hope that all of you are beginning to feel it as well. Will, Tim, Mike, you've reminded us why what we do here matters as much as it does, why government matters, why independent reflection matters, why critical thinking matters, why service matters. Perhaps most powerfully to me, your presence and your thoughtfulness illustrate how and why friendship matters. Even for a guy like me who talks a lot and even talks for a living, if there's one limitation I've ever found in the English language, it's that there just aren't enough ways to say the phrase, I love you and thank you. But on behalf of the Legion, the thousands of students who've passed through these doors over the last quarter century, and the hundreds who've served in the staff shirts, usually blue, and those who've yet to come, we love you and thank you. Okay, one quick thing, and then I'm going to ask that you guys all remain in your seats while our guests get escorted from the stage, after which we're going to have some announcements. We have at least one from athletics, and there's probably others. Each time Reverend Trent concludes a service, he'll offer a benediction written by a colleague of his, and while I realize this isn't a religious gathering, I always feel the message is spot on for the theme of the program. And it goes like this. Friends, our worship has ended, but now our service begins. Go forth from this place, for you are the light of God, and the whole world awaits you. So live passionately, love faithfully, and celebrate every moment of your life from now until the finale. For our God lives, loves, and sustains us this day and every day, and may it always be so for each and every one of you. Sergeant at Arms, please escort our honored guests from the hall.